Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me this privilege. I would like to share with you the perspective that I see after spending almost 2 years in Southeast Asia, learning the customers and learning the operating business models, my view on the private networks. So just let me starting with the introduction of Axiata. So Axiata operates in 6 countries as the mobile operator. This is Indonesia, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Cambodia, and Nepal. And also having TowerCo business and the digital business. And at the enterprise, we are working as Axiata Enterprise. We're working on the technology and product stacks to foster innovation in this region. So, back to our subject. Sometimes it's good really to ask again this basic and fundamental question: what does the customer want? And actually, like, if you look from the consumer perspective and from the enterprise perspective, it's obvious that the needs are totally different. Very often they are like almost opposite if you are talking about the requirements. So the consumers, they want just to have a good enough network at the good price. They just want to use it, you know, to connect socially, for the entertainment. This is what they want. And this is how we've been developing the networks for many years. But if we talk now about the enterprise customers, they just want to run the business applications. They want to have the connectivity that is critical. They want to make sure that whatever technology they apply, there will be no break. So the question is there a good all-purpose network? In the last years, you know, we have so many releases of the 3GPP standards. And there will be more and more. And the path to implement everything on the same technology stack, from my perspective, it's not a good way, because we'll not get the efficiency, neither for consumers nor for the enterprises. So if we look from the enterprise perspective, the enterprise customers don't need networks. Their need is to get a business gain, to improve their operations, to improve the efficiency. And of course, you know, then they are working on the solutions. And it turns out that very often the solutions, they require technologies. And the technologies are not only related to the networking. Networking is just supporting the top industry trends that we see right now. So also, if we look from the private network perspective, we need to have in mind those trends that needs to be supported. And again, it's very different to the technology stacks, to the network stacks, and the expectations on the macro network, on the networks mostly built for the consumers. Like working with the customers, working on various use cases on 5G, we just mapped those use cases. As you see here, the functional requirements for the network, private networks, which is like AP exposure, like video surveillance and analysis, like remote controlled machines, massive sensors, mission-critical communications, V2X, and so on. These are typical kind of enablers that you can find in many use cases. So this is the foundation that needs to be delivered. And if we transfer it to the requirements for the technology, we see that the path that we know from the macro networks, which is very much the EMBB, is okay. This part is present almost in every use case. But that's what you see for the use cases. There are also other requirements that need to be fulfilled. And to my eyes, the development of the macro networks, especially or the 5G core in the macro networks and the deployments, it's behind of the expectation of the industry. So from my perspective, I see that if I look at the roadmaps of the telco operators, I don't see that, you know, many of those features will come very soon. From my perspective, the solution is if you really go now into deployments of the private networks, because then you can deliver it in the optimal way. Sharing the stack of public network with the enterprises, it's a good concept. That was the foundation of the 5G slicing and so on. But in the end, it will be costly, because this will take the resources from the macro network. And unless we'll get really cloud native deployments, distributed deployments of 5G core, it will take years. So to address the needs of the enterprises, not 2025 plus, but 2023, 2004, from my perspective, the right and only way is to go for the private network. And is there a business for that? So that what we see is definitely that the global 5G services market has a super strong growth dynamics. So the dynamics of like 30% is giving great perspectives for the people in the value chain. Also, if I look, you know, at the private network perspective, in the countries where we operate, like Malaysia, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Cambodia, you already see there are opportunities. You already see there are businesses that are strong enough to invest into the technology, including 5G private networking. But what they always need is just ultimate cost efficiency. They will not take, you know, like $2, $3, $4 million into hand to get the private network. You need to be way sub $1 million. And how to get it? How to optimize the computing footprint? How to make sure, you know, that this network will be not expensive and still will be modern in the way that you can have the features like positioning, GPS-less positioning, which is very often asked by the customers. So with that, the private network is the only answer. And the good thing is that already consumers are educated. They know that the private networks bring the benefits. There are already deployments of the private network, so this is a very good foundation for the 5G. Usually, if you are talking about the 4G, the deployments are more like, you know, you go like with private LTE base stations and you have some remote UPF there. This is a simple thing, but you have the customer relationships, the customer understands, you know, the migration, and this is, I believe, the foundation where the private 5G networks will get accelerated the most. This is the example, you know, from our customer, like in Indonesia, private network solutions for Pama and Valley with Nokia. Similar solution also for mining industry in Indonesia. This is done together with Huawei. And then you see, you know, that already there are like use cases that can be expanded and improved with 5G. And also what is important and what I like very much that, first of all, what we see in Asia, This is a great openness to innovations. The second thing is that there are also very specific industries to Asia where you can't source any innovation from outside, where you need to go with your customer on the innovation path. Because the farming in Indonesia is totally different than the farming in US or in Europe. There is a zero connection. You can't reuse any of the solutions. If you go to Bangladesh or to Cambodia, where you have a very strong textile and garmenting industry, you don't find this industry in US. You don't find this industry in Europe. This has been already brought here to Asia. If you want to innovate, then you need to be on your own innovation process. And again, to support the innovations, you need the technology stack that is not expensive because the customer will not risk. There is always a level of failure in innovation, and this is like granted that some of the use cases will fail. And the second thing, for those innovation, you need to have a very flexible stacks. You have to have open ecosystem of the technology providers, and you can't be simply dependent on one technology vendor. And this is, I believe, what, let's say, this fact will constitute the way how the private networks will be built in the next years. And this is what we are doing at Axiata. So we are trying to build the ecosystem, open ecosystem where everyone can find the place if he has a good enabler, if he has a good use case, or if he has a good technology solutions. So we are very much working like with the Western giants. We are working with, like for the private networking, we are working with the companies like Rakuten Symphony, like Mavenir, with the integrators of the solutions, but also of the network stacks, like the Capgemini's, Tech Mahindra's, HCL technologies of this world, because those guys, they know both sides. They know how to deliver the solution, and they know pretty well the networking side. Because in the same time, they are the engineering companies, the software engineering companies that provide the software to the tech giants. And of course, we are building our own execution arm, like the own cyber fusion center, own development capabilities with the Axiata Digital Lab. Because if you want to be competitive, you can't rely, only on the outside resources. You need to have, the local, strong local developers. And if you look now for the industries, I believe we'll get the first applications of the private networks in Southeast Asia. This is very much about the ports, airports, oil and gas, mining, probably also retail, maybe smart cities, and definitely manufacturing. What is the challenge? The challenge for us is that regulator is very much, focused on the macro networks. One of the biggest challenges, in Asia is how to get the frequencies for the enterprise networks. You don't need to have, like super low frequency to deliver the coverage, but you need to have a piece of spectrum that you can deploy. There is an unused spectrum, like from the old 4G projects like TDD and so on. So the question is, how to get it repurposed very quickly to support the enterprise innovations. And this is also my humble call to GSMA to help us in passing this message, around the world to get, the awareness that we need to change the way how we deliver private networks. Yes, so as the summary, the enterprise enterprise needs are very different. The efficient implementation of the standards to support enterprise networks, in my opinion, requires forking 5G. Just do the fork, just recognize, there is different path in the implementation for the macro networks, different, for the enterprise networks. And this is like not only in the ecosystem, but also very much on the supplier side. Because we need here the support of big suppliers. And very much often when I see that, those big suppliers, I'll still focus on the macro networks because this is the place where we get the money. And the very last thing, like building open 5G ecosystem is the must to get the innovations in every country. Okay, thank you very much. And I will be happy to take the questions after the presentation, or now or after the session.